The dust clung to the air like old memories as the afternoon sun beat down on the county auction grounds. The crowd, a jumbled mosaic of weathered farmers, eager horse traders, and the occasional wide-eyed city dweller, buzzed with casual conversation and the scent of hay and uncertainty. Among them stood Dr. Elsie Hart, a veterinarian known more for her solitude than her words. She wasn't supposed to be there. She hadn't planned to come. And yet something, perhaps a tug too quiet for reason to hear, had pulled her to the auction that day. She kept her coat buttoned despite the warmth, the faded leather bag hanging from her shoulder like a weight she'd long grown used to. Her eyes, sharp and seasoned, scanned the pens with professional detachment, but every now and then, her gaze lingered too long, softened too much. Her colleagues often joked she had more empathy for horses than humans. Maybe it was true. Horses didn't lie. The auctioneer's voice thundered over the speaker system, barking out numbers in praise, making even the most run-down of animals sound like a champion. Elsie paid little attention until she heard the nervous rustle near the end of the row. Not the shout of a bid, not the rumble of hooves, but a low, urgent murmur. Something was wrong. She found the source fast. A dark bay mare, sweat-soaked and breathing hard, her flanks trembling with effort. The tag on her pen read only, Lot 94, Mare, estimated 12 years, unbroken. A teenager stood beside the pen, holding a lead rope too loose, eyes wide and pale with panic. "She's in labor," Elsie said, her voice cool but clipped. "How far along?" The boy blinked, swallowing hard. I don't know. I just haul him. They didn't say nothing about her being pregnant." Elsie dropped her bag at the fence and climbed inside before anyone could argue. The mare gave a low groan and staggered back a step, nearly colliding with the wood slats behind her. The crowd began to notice. Whispers swelled like a wave, people pointing, phones coming out. "She's gonna foal now," Elsie muttered, brushing her hand gently along the mare's side. Too fast, too stressed. The mare buckled to the ground, legs folding under her like wet paper. Elsie dropped to her knees, the sawdust biting into her skin. "I need space," she shouted. "Everyone back. She's foaling in real time. Someone get me water and a towel." No one moved at first. It took the commanding tone of the auctioneer, now off mic, to jolt the bystanders into motion. A bucket appeared. A towel. Someone handed her gloves. None of it felt fast enough. Elsie's hands moved on instinct. This wasn't her clinic. There was no assistant, no sterile tray, no comfort of familiarity, only adrenaline, urgency, and a horse in danger. The mare let out another cry, her eyes rolling, hooves kicking. Then came the first glimpse of life, a pair of tiny hooves, slick and trembling, peeking out. "Too small," Elsie whispered. She froze. Something wasn't right. The hooves weren't aligned the way they should be. Twisted slightly. And there was more, something dark and moving behind them. Panic fluttered in her chest. "Breach," she breathed. She leaned into the mare, speaking softly, calming her despite the growing roar of the crowd. "Come on, girl. Stay with me. We've got this." She reached in, delicately, firmly, working to adjust the angle. The mare's body fought her. One wrong move could cost them both. And then the foal began to emerge. Slowly, painfully. First the legs, then the head, small and too narrow. A gasp rippled through the crowd. It had two heads. No, it looked like two. But it wasn't. As the foal slipped free, fully exposed in the straw and dirt, the truth hit like a slap. There were two foals. Twins. Elsie's eyes widened in disbelief. Dear God. Both were undersized, still slick with the afterbirth, squirming weakly. One didn't cry. The other gave the faintest mewl. The mare flinched, then went terrifyingly still. Elsie turned, heart hammering. "I need help now. She's crashing." Someone behind her screamed. Not out of fear, but shock. A woman fainted. It wasn't clear who it was, only that the moment the twin foals came into full view, something primal shifted in the crowd. Awe, confusion, and yes, panic. Elsie barely noticed. Her focus narrowed to the mare's shallow breathing, the near-translucent skin of the foals. She checked pulses, rubbed towels against tiny chests, fought the trembling in her own hands. The mare didn't move. "Don't do this," Elsie murmured, her voice cracking. "Don't leave them. Not like this." And then the mare blinked. A slow, fragile flutter. Elsie exhaled, half laugh, half sob. "That's it. That's my girl." The foals huddled against each other, still not strong enough to stand. One was slightly larger, more active. The other barely moved at all. She knew the odds. Twin births in horses were rare and dangerous. Most didn't survive. And here they were, alive. But how long? Someone tapped her shoulder. A man in a pressed shirt and clipboard. "Ma'am," he said, face pale. We didn't know she was pregnant. She was about to be auctioned in the next lot." Elsie stared at him. "You were going to sell a heavily pregnant mare? Without vet clearance?" He hesitated. "We didn't. It wasn't on her intake. She came from a seizure, neglect case. Got dropped in yesterday. No one's touched her since." Elsie looked back at the mare, who now weakly licked one of her foals. Abandoned, forgotten, thrust into chaos, and still trying to protect her young. "I'm taking her," Elsie said. The man blinked. "What? She's not going back in that ring. Not with 2 premature foals. She needs medical care, and they need around-the-clock support. I'm taking her. But you'll have to bid." "I'm not bidding," she snapped, standing to her full height. "You'll sign her over, or I'll have the inspector here in 20 minutes asking how a pregnant rescue ended up almost dying in front of 50 witnesses." The man paled. "Okay. All right. I'll talk to the boss." Elsie knelt back beside the mare, brushing straw from a foal's bodies with the gentleness of someone who'd seen too many endings and not enough beginnings. The mare's eyes followed her, not with fear, but with something else. Recognition, as if some wordless bond had already formed, rooted in survival and sorrow. Around them, the crowd had fallen quiet. No more phones, no more chatter. Just breath, just awe. And somewhere in the distance, a baby let out its first full cry. The tires of Elsie's old pickup crunched down the gravel driveway of her property, just as the sky softened into the gold of early evening. The truck's engine gave a protesting cough before dying altogether, as if mirroring her exhaustion. In the trailer hitched behind, the mare shifted uneasily. The 2 newborn foals, swaddled in hay and bundled beside her, let out weak, high-pitched bleats. Their voices didn't sound like they belonged to this world yet. Too light, too tentative, as if they hadn't decided whether to stay. Elsie stepped out slowly, her joints creaking nearly as loud as the truck had. She walked to the trailer and placed a calming hand on the mare's flank. "You made it, girl," she murmured, her voice like a bomb. "Let's get you all settled." Inside the converted barn that doubled as her clinic, the scent of antiseptic mixed with straw. The space was utilitarian, neat, and filled with the kind of purposeful clutter that only made sense to someone who lived and breathed this work. Every cabinet, every hook, every inch of the space bore the weight of years of urgency, healing, and quiet prayers whispered between sutures and 4 bags. The mare was guided gently into a large padded stall under low, soft light. The foals were placed on a warming mat, near a wall lined with heat lamps. One tried to raise its head, gave a faint shake, and collapsed again, panting. Elsie's brow tightened. She slipped on gloves and began checking vitals, one foal after the other. Temperature, respiration, reflexes. The smaller one, the filly, was struggling more. Her heart rate was low, limbs stiff. Elsie listened to the fragile thump with her stethoscope, expression unreadable. She pulled out a vial of glucose, set up a makeshift feeding tube, and whispered soothing nonsense as she worked. "Come on, little one. Stay with me. You're not done yet." The mare watched with wide, glassy eyes, too weak to stand, but not taking her gaze off her babies. Elsie paused just long enough to meet her stare. "I know," she said softly. "I'll do everything I can." Hours passed. The sun fell, the stars came, and the barn filled with the soft buzz of machines, the low hum of heat lamps, and the rhythmic rustle of life clinging to its place in the world. Elsie moved without rest, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug, her thoughts never straying far from the foals. She'd seen enough death to know how easily it could walk through this door. And yet, some part of her refused to accept that tonight. Just before midnight, a knock sounded at the side door. Elsie flinched, glancing up. No one ever came this late. She opened it to find a man standing there, tall and lean, his frame silhouetted against the moonlight. His hat was pulled low, but not low enough to hide the scar cutting across his jaw. His clothes were travel-worn, dusty boots, an old canvas jacket. A duffel hung from one shoulder. "I heard," he said simply. "At the auction." Elsie didn't move. "What did you hear?" He shifted, glancing toward the light spilling from the barn behind her. That a vet saved a dying mare and 2 foals. That one of them wasn't going to make it through the night. She didn't step aside, didn't invite him in. And I've delivered twins once before. A long time ago. Thought you might need another set of hands. Elsie studied him. Something about his posture, the tiredness in it, felt familiar. Not the man himself, but the way he carried a weight too old for his body. "You a vet?" "No," he said. "Just a cowboy who's buried too many horses to want to bury another." Silence stretched between them. Then, without a word, Elsie stepped back and held the door open. Inside the barn, the man moved carefully, without disrupting the rhythm. He crouched beside the heat mat, gazed at the foals for a long moment, then started helping without asking questions. He adjusted the tubing, checked the heating levels, brushed straw from the mare's side. Elsie watched, suspicious but curious. "You have a name?" she asked finally. "Silas," he said. "Silas what?" He looked at her, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. "Just Silas." Elsie didn't press. The barn had always been a place of unspoken rules, where people could show up with ghosts and not be asked to name them. The filly stirred again, just after 3. Her legs kicked, feebly but with purpose. Silas looked up. "She's fighting." Elsie allowed herself the tiniest nod. "She is." For a while, neither of them spoke. They worked together in a silence filled with shared concentration. When the filly finally managed to lift her head and bleated, weak but unmistakably alive, Elsie felt the burn of tears she hadn't expected. "She might pull through," Silas said, not smiling, just stating the truth as if daring the universe to argue. "She'll need tube feeding every 2 hours. Her gut's not ready for anything else." "I'll stay." Elsie turned to him. "Why?" He reached out, brushing a single piece of hay from the filly's ear. "Because I've seen what happens when no one stays." A long silence followed, deeper than before. Elsie looked at him and saw not just a man offering help, but someone who had once waited too long to offer it. Someone who had been late, and maybe, in being here now, he was trying to rewrite something he never got right the first time. She exhaled slowly. "There's a cot in the corner. Don't trip on the oxygen tank." He nodded once and moved toward it, boots dragging slightly. The barn felt warmer somehow, not just from the heat lamps or the body heat of the animals, but from the fragile, strange flicker of trust that had just passed between 2 strangers at the end of the world. Elsie sat beside the mare, her hand resting gently on the mother's warm side. The mare blinked slowly, and for the first time since the auction, she closed her eyes, not in pain, but in rest. Outside, a wind rose and shifted the trees. Inside, 3 lives hung by threads, and yet, for the first time in hours, those threads didn't feel like they were fraying. Not yet. And in the darkness, the filly gave one soft, determined cry. By dawn, the filly stood on her own legs, wobbly and trembling, but upright. Her coat still clung damp to her sides, and her head drooped low from the weight of exhaustion, but she was alive. Elsie watched from across the stall, hands wrapped around a fresh mug of coffee, her body aching in every possible way. Yet there was something in her chest, light, stirring, like the first crack of spring beneath thawed soil. Silas crouched near the colt, who remained curled beneath the warming lamp. He gained some color overnight, breath deepened and even. "He'll be slower," Silas murmured, mostly to himself. "But he's got that same stubborn look." Elsie raised a brow. "You see stubborn in a sleeping foal." Silas shrugged, not taking his eyes off the colt. You'd be surprised what you can see when you've spent enough time waiting for animals to get back up. Elsie didn't laugh, but her lips twitched slightly. That was the most she'd offered in years. She sipped her coffee and studied Silas with a subtle kind of calculation. He had worked the entire night beside her, not once complaining, not once asking for anything. He didn't carry the air of someone trying to prove himself, just someone who needed to be here as much as the foals needed saving. She set her mug down and approached the stall. They'll both need weeks before they're stable. Tube feedings, careful weight checks, any hint of infection, and— I know, Silas said gently, but they made it through the first night. That's something. Elsie nodded. She looked at the mare, who was lying down again, eyes half-lidded, still too weak to nurse, but now lifting her head when anyone approached. That was progress. You have a place to be? She asked, surprising even herself. No. You always travel with a duffel and know where to go. Silas paused, then answered. I used to have a place. Then I stayed too long somewhere I shouldn't be. Now I don't stay anywhere. Elsie crossed her arms. That's vague. He met her eyes. So's your hospitality. Something like a smirk tugged at the corner of her mouth. She turned to hide it. You hungry? Starving. They ate in silence in the small side room attached to the barn. 2 mismatched bowls of oatmeal and toast spread with jam that had turned to sugar. The kitchen smelled faintly of cedar and old hay, a scent that spoke of time more than anything else. Between bites, Silas finally asked, What happened to your hand? Elsie blinked. She hadn't realized he'd noticed. Her left hand, rigid with an old injury, moved stiffly, the fingers slightly curled. Broke it years ago. A stallion panicked during transport. Crushed it against the trailer wall. Never healed right. You still work like it didn't. What else would I do? She asked flatly. Silas didn't answer. Instead, he glanced toward the open barn door, where early sunlight cut through dust motes in golden shafts. You ever name them? The foals. Yeah. Elsie thought about it. Not usually. Not unless they make it. He nodded, then tilted his head. What about now? She looked at the filly, who was nosing weakly at the straw, and the colt, who had just shifted for the first time in an hour. I'll think about it, she said, and cleared the dishes. As the day stretched on, tasks multiplied. Feedings, cleanings, bandage changes, vital signs. Silas moved through it all like someone who had always belonged in that barn. At one point, he paused at the fence line, watching a hawk circle far above the fields. Elsie came up beside him, brushing her hands off on her jeans. What were you before all this? She asked. He hesitated. Rodeo rider. Then wrangler. Then just drifted. Drifted. Sometimes people stop calling. Sometimes you don't want them to anymore. There was a sharp silence, the kind not born of judgment but recognition. Elsie looked away. My husband died 10 years ago. Truck rolled in a storm. After that, I stopped picking up the phone too. Silas turned to her, his face softer now. That why you started rescuing the ones no one else wants? I don't rescue them, she said. I just don't let them die alone. The sun dipped lower again. In the barn, the filly nuzzled her brother as he stirred for his first real attempt to stand. He grunted, pushed up on spindly legs, then collapsed again. Elsie stepped forward instinctively, but Silas held up a hand. Wait, let him try. They watched. The colt braced again, ears twitching, lips smacking. His legs trembled under his weight. Then, inch by inch, he rose. Unsteady, yes, but standing. A breath escaped both of them at once. Elsie whispered, I'll be damned. Silas smiled, not broadly, just a quiet, honest curve. Told you he had stubborn in him. That night, Elsie sat beside the mare, running a gentle hand down her neck. I've decided, she said aloud. Silas, stacking hay bales nearby, looked up. About what? The names. Filly's Hope. Colt's Chance. He nodded once, not mocking the sentiment, not even commenting, just honoring it. Outside, the wind had picked up. Clouds gathered in the west, heavy with the promise of spring rain. Inside the barn, under the hum of lamps and soft straw rustle, for lives, too human, Too equine, rested in the eye of a storm not yet come. The foals had survived their first days, but ahead waited weeks of fragile recovery, nights of uncertainty, and choices that would test the strength of their caregivers just as much as their own will to live. Elsie looked at Silas. "You planning to leave soon?" He studied her face, her guarded softness, the fatigue lined with something stronger. "Not yet," he said. She gave a quiet nod, then stood and flicked off the overhead lights, leaving only the warm glow around the stall. Hope and Chance, breathing slow and steady, curled beside their mother. Elsie stepped into the darkness, Silas behind her, and for the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel like something to be feared. It felt like something waiting to begin. The rain started as a whisper against the barn roof, a shy tapping that soon swelled into a steady drumbeat. Inside, warmth clung to the wood and hay, carrying the earthy scent of animals and feed. Hope and Chance were growing stronger with each passing day, though every small victory was hard-won. Hope could now wobble from one end of the stall to the other, and Chance, though still frail, had found the strength to nurse without assistance. Elsie stood at the feed-room counter, scribbling figures into her worn ledger. The vet bills had come in, stacked like warnings. Medications, supplements, transport fees. She ran a calloused hand through her hair, muttered under her breath, then slammed the book shut. Silas was in the main barn, brushing down one of the older rescues. The gelding stood quiet, eyes half closed in trust. Silas worked slowly, carefully, like the act of grooming was more prayer than chore. Elsie leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You always this quiet, or is it just around me?" He looked up, brushing a strand of mane from his forehead. "Talking's easy. Saying something worth hearing's harder." She tilted her head. "That from experience?" He nodded once, then returned to his task. "I used to talk a lot. Made promises I couldn't keep. People remember that kind of thing." A beat of silence passed between them. "I got a letter this morning," she said. "County inspector's coming. Wants to see the property. Make sure I'm not running a liability." Silas didn't stop brushing. "Are you?" Elsie narrowed her eyes. "That a joke?" "Not at all. You've got 2 foals that nearly died, a barn full of half-broken rescues, and a vet bill that could sink a small town." She didn't answer right away. Then, with a sigh, she walked to the stall where Hope was pressing her nose into Chance's side. "I never planned any of this, you know. It just happened. One broken horse at a time." Silas joined her at the gate. "You've built something that matters. That's rare, but it doesn't pay the bills." "No," he agreed. "It doesn't." They both stood in silence, watching the foals shift and settle into the straw. Later that afternoon, Elsie took Silas out to the far pasture. The grass was still muddy from the thaw, and the fencing sagged in 2 places. "This land used to feed a dozen animals," she said, gesturing with her chin. "Now it barely holds 4. I've patched that wire 5 times this year. One good storm, and it'll collapse." Silas crouched, testing a section with his hands. "You want help, or you just want someone to see it?" She blinked, surprised by the question. "Both, I think." "I can fix this." She looked at him skeptically. He rose. "I've built fence from Montana to Texas. Learned from old men who didn't believe in shortcuts." "You offering to stay?" "I'm offering to help," he said. "If that's worth something." Elsie studied him a long moment, the wind lifting strands of hair from her face. "It is." By the next morning, Silas had begun. He tore out the worst section, dug new post holes by hand, and strung fresh wire Elsie didn't even realize she had stored in the old shed. Each motion was methodical, practiced. She watched from the barn, arms folded, an unfamiliar ache blooming in her chest. Not the burden of doing it all alone, but the unease of letting someone else carry part of the weight. Inside, Chance had developed a cough. Small at first, then sharp and persistent. The vet came that evening, a sharp-eyed woman named Karen, who wore her concern like a second skin. "Could be pneumonia," she said after the exam. "It's early, but don't wait. Start antibiotics tonight. Watch for fever." Elsie nodded, but her shoulders tightened. More medicine, more costs. After the vet left, she stood in the feed room, staring at the nearly empty vial of penicillin and the folded bill. Silas entered behind her. "How bad?" he asked. She handed him the paper. He read it in silence. "I can sell the saddle," she said quietly. "The one in the attic. It's worth something." "Don't," he replied. "I've got some money stashed. Was saving it for a trailer I don't even own anymore." She looked at him sharply. "I'm not taking your—" "It's not a gift," he said. "It's a trade. For the roof over my head and the food in my gut. Fair." She hesitated, then nodded. That night, the wind screamed over the hills, and the rain returned, lashing against the barn walls. Inside, Elsie sat by Chance, her fingers gently stroking his coat. He coughed once, then settled. Silas sat nearby, back against a post, a wool blanket draped over his legs. "Why'd you really leave the rodeo?" she asked quietly. He stared up at the ceiling. "Had a fall. Broke my collarbone. Took longer than it should have to heal. Then I got scared." "Of what?" "Of going back. Of not being as good as I was before." Elsie absorbed that. Then, "Funny how we punish ourselves for surviving." Silas looked over at her, eyes tired but soft. "You ever think about quitting all this?" "Every day. And yet here you are. I guess I don't know what else to be." He didn't answer, but he reached out, laid his hand gently over hers where it rested on Chance's side. They stayed like that, unmoving, listening to the foal's breath, the wind outside, and the silence between storms. In the days that followed, the rain stopped. Chance's fever passed. The fence held, and something fragile, unnamed, began to root itself in the soil between them. Not yet strong, but growing. And the county inspector hadn't even arrived yet.